Welcome everyone to another episode of the Average Ontario Anglers podcast. This episode has been a long time coming, as in I've wanted it to be here ever since we started the podcast. And we have a couple very important guests today. And I would just wanted to say it's an honor to have these guys on. You might know them from the Fishin Canada show or from their own podcast, Outdoor Journal Radio. We have Angelo Viola and Pete Bowman.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
How's it going, guys?
Absolutely awesome. Better now. And as usual, we also have Jesse. Let's not forget him, the guy that helps keep this podcast operational. Now, this is going to be the first time we actually are going to skip having an interesting fishing fact or having a triple T or a TNT. This is the first time in our podcast history that we're not doing that. And that's because we want to have as much time as possible to talk to these guys, pick their brains about a topic that
take long.
You might want to double up on that fishing fact by the time you're done with this thing.
Well, we'll do our best to keep you talking. Don't worry.
Okay, right. Perfect.
So we're going to jump right into the main topic today, which is about fishing from small crafts. Now, here we've talked about it a few times, but I know on the Fishin Canada show, I've seen you guys many times, on some fly-in lodges or even, doing some interior stuff. You're not always an FNC one. Your nice custom boat there. You've been in some smaller crafts.
Mm-hmm. We have probably a lot more than most people realize or even think. Although I got to tell you, sitting in FNC one certainly has its up. For sure.
Yeah.
Listen, at the end of the day, it's whatever it takes to get you out there to do this thing we call fishing, this passion that we have for the outdoors and fishing in particular. So big, small, doesn't really matter. I know that really popular right now, kayak fishing. Who would have ever thought that?
Very popular. And
and canoe fishing.
Yeah.
There's nothing like, in my opinion, there's not a better moment than you and a buddy, a spouse, a child, whatever the case may be, in a canoe in the solitude of one of those northern lakes or even somewhere in Algonquin Park, someplace that, is a little bit off the beaten path. But sitting on that canoe in the middle of that lake, there's nothing like it.
I agree.
The experience
I did
wonderful.
A lot as a kid. So our summers, a lot of our vacations every summer, where we'd stop at Sudbury and go to our cousin's camp. They call it a camp, not a cottage up there. It's always a camp. And then we'd move on to Fort Francis in that area. And the Sudbury area, at their camp, they had, I remember it was a fiberglass tiller boat. So it was heavy. It was good size, but they also had a canoe there. And some of my best memories are just getting up so early in the morning. Hey, Peter, wear your life jacket. Put the life jacket on. And trust me, it's very important to everybody listening too. And then I'd go out there, and the misty morning, you know what I mean? And everybody was these are all adults, so they're all probably hungover, and they didn't want to go fishing or whatever. And I wanted to hit the lake, and I was just young, and it was out of a canoe. You just sit there and you're looking around, and sometimes you don't even fish. It's so nice, like what Anne's just saying, the experience of up north in a canoe, so quiet. You never hear a motor until 10 o'clock in the morning on the lake. So absolutely, I love canoe fishing though. Later in life, like I've done it a little bit, I still have a canoe. It's a little hard on our older bodies now, though. I have to say, when you're sitting on that chair, by the end of the day, not the paddling is all good, but that by the end of the day, the old back's starting to feel pretty good. So I can't wait to try a kayak, that's for sure. So
I agree. Yeah, we even Jesse and I, we've complained about being in the canoe for a long period of time. We fished out a canoe for I have my Swift canoe, my Algonquin 16-footer. I fished out of that one. We fished out of that for years. I bought it when I was 14 years old. We did a lot, but I tell you, as soon as we got motors, as soon as we got the sports pal, we could stand up and stretch your back.
I think that's the key, right? Because a lot of times I'd even try and kneel down in the canoe just to get a different, just to get a better feel for it when you're paddling or something like that. That was the only downfall to it, but it's far. That's nothing compared to the experience you get and the places you can sneak into. Like that's just a canoe. Obviously, you can do it with all the small boats. With a canoe, it's ridiculous how many places you can, bass fishing. You go into these little coves and little flooded areas that nobody can get into. It's pretty amazing. So effective.
I just have a question. Then, what different crafts, especially small crafts, then what crafts have you been able to fish out of?
Oh, I've right down to a U-boat or a belly boat, which is an inflatable.
You did that,
inflatable tire tube. Right all the way up. I mean, there isn't a vessel I don't think that we have not had
We've
on
done,
the show, including those little
folda boats.
Those little
right?
folda boats. We've done that quite a bit. But
You ever seen those? Those ones that fold out?
Yeah, the origami boat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an origami boat. That's a
it.
great description of
But
it.
you know what? It works.
They
when
work.
when you need to get
Wow.
into some place that has zero access.
Yeah.
Man, those things.
They were like, what, they
Those
10 footers, maybe 10 or 12. They were
yeah.
short, but they were wide. So
Yeah.
they're quite stable. Like talking about with the canoe, they're very stable for the width of them. We used to have a Coleman crawdad. Remember that?
Coleman crawdad. That's
Coleman
what I was going to say.
crawdad.
Those
We
little
put-
square things.
Yeah, we put a little 2 horsepower on that. One of those 2 horsepower that you had the gas tank on the top. You could spin it right around, so your reverse was pointing backwards.
Yeah. I have one.
They were great.
I think one of the most interesting crafts I've ever fished out of was a little 12-foot tinner. We were in BC. We took the tinner to a Home Hardware,
Oh yeah.
and we built ourselves the ultimate fishing machine using this 12-foot tin boat as a
It
base.
was a Princecraft.
It was a Princecraft, yeah.
Yeah.
And oh my God, that was the best. We built this thing into a full-blown fishing vessel, and it was fantastic out of a 12-foot tin boat. So it can be done.
That sounds reminiscent of my attempts. I'm turning a 14-foot tinner, but I'm doing my own custom decking
Yeah,
and
right.
stuff on it. trying to turn it into a bass boat because it's all I can tow with an Elantra.
Good one.
There's no need for it's one thing saying, well, I can only afford, or I can only use, say, a 14-foot tin boat, but there's no need not to put some creature comforts into it,
Yeah.
like a flat floor,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the most important thing as anglers is being able to stand up on a
Absolutely.
flat floor. So
Absolutely.
it's fantastic.
And then all of our, like you said, all of our lodge shoots, pretty much every one of them is, we've had some where you get the big cedar strip boats and they're like 18 footers. You get some big boats in these places, but the most of them, they are 14, not 12 and 12s, but 14 or 16 foot aluminums, tiller boats. And we fish out of them all the time. We make do with what we've got. And some of the water's bigger than average. You get some of these areas that are big open water areas and that, and you'll get wet and beat up in them, and you know that you can't go out there on that certain windy day and all that. But we fished out of all kinds of smaller boats like that, and they're all very fishable. It's up to you as an angler to adapt to it, right? If you got a little tiller, if you got a little trolling motor, we put a little tiller trolling motor on the back. We'll do that. Sometimes the electric motor, and then for our fish finders, we Garmin it up big time. We have a whole live scope ice kit that we've converted to a open water kit, and we bring that either on the ice or in the open water and just change it around, the transducers, et cetera, et cetera. We'll have that set up, and boy, I'll tell you, when we get that going on with a little tiller boat, we're pretty happy.
Probably even more efficient that way to use electronics, probably even more efficient on that size of boat than it is on FNC1, for example, our big Princecraft, because you're limited to the amount of movement that you can make from point A to point B. So you try and utilize as much of that technology as you possibly can in that particular spot or that area without moving a lot. So there's something to be said about fishing out of a small boat. No question about it.
You guys are hitting every single point that I wanted to talk about.
Okay, the podcast's over. Thanks, everybody.
No, there's more. But if you had to choose, you talked about having live scope on the boat. Again, for us, we haven't had one yet, but I keep entering the giveaways on you, but I haven't won yet. So
don't stop trying, man. We've got one going on right now for a complete kit. So
yeah.
But if you had to choose a few electronics, what do you normally bring in when you have to fish out of a smaller craft, like a say a tin boat or even a canoe? What would be some electronics that you would say is an absolute must that if possible you want to bring with you
as a bare minimum? Because as Pete said, we've got a kit that we fly in with us now to Outback Lakes. It's the complete deal, man. We do some scoping on these lakes like it's nobody's business. But we put together a real kit. It's like an ice fishing kit, as Pete mentioned, or it's a
portable kit.
Portable
basically.
kit.
Yeah.
But as a bare minimum, here's the thing. You need to know the depth that you're fishing. So as a bare minimum, you need something that gives you a good, solid, reliable signal telling you that you're in 10 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet, and more importantly, telling you that you've gone from 10 feet to 3 feet and down again, right? That's key. So how you can go out there without that, to us now, is kind of hard to even fathom. You have to have eyes below the surface. So whatever it takes to do that, that would be the bare minimum.
Yeah, a good traditional screen. As long as you have a nice, good, clean traditional screen, you can do a lot with that, as you guys know, for sure. The other key to us up in these northern lakes, they're not mapped. So a unit that you can quick draw in Garmin's case that you make your own maps with, that's huge. That is so huge, because then when you start coloring in your maps and you start looking at this picture you've made, said, no wonder these fish are there, And so a traditional screen and good, produced mapping that you can produce, invaluable. Those two things right there are the ultimate to as a minimum. Then you add your side finding is very important. I think side finding is much more important than clear view in my case, because you can do traditional in that, but so the side is, but you're getting extra there. You maybe have to have a more expensive transducer, et cetera, et cetera. So that traditional and the good mapping.
Yeah, I agree, because we have a Garmin too for my Sports Pal. Yeah. And we have, I think it's a Garmin Striker 7 or something like that. Yep. But we do have that quick draw mapping, which is fantastic, because a lot of these small lakes that we pop into, obviously you can't get that on Navionics. It's not on there.
Right.
So we all just drive up and down the lake a few times, because you can scan I think 100 feet on both sides.
Right.
We'll just drive up and down and kind of map the area that we're going to fish that day. And again, where the drop-offs are, where maybe, there's a shallow area that comes up that you might want to avoid and not drive into. So it is super handy to have, because again, you'll never find the mapping itself. You have to do it yourself, which is
right.
And taking that one step further, Jess, we've been relying on good quality mapping for years now in electronics, but it's not perfect. The only thing that's perfect is quick draw, because it's the real deal. So we run it all the time. Forget about just the fly-in remote lakes and all that stuff. Lakes that are so well documented and mapped, we run quick draw all the time. And we're constantly finding things that nobody sees, because they just go by the traditional maps. And sometimes either things have changed or the detail just wasn't there in the traditional map making, right? So it's vital. I know we'll spend half a day mapping out a point before we even fish it, and just going back and forth and getting all the details of that point. Because to us, you have to know what it is that you're throwing your lures to, right? You have to know that it's a hump. You have to know that it's a boulder. You have to know that it's sand versus rock. You have to know all these things. So why spend your time fishing when you could spend your time detailing the area on a map, right? So it's vital, absolutely vital.
That's a good point, is just making it, talking about what you're going to throw at it. You have to know what you're going to do it, because it's all about a presentation. You have to know what you're presenting to and how you can best do that.
Right. The striker unit you have, it doesn't have built-in maps anyways, does it? You can just create, it's got waypoints, and then you create a map, right? Is that correct?
It's the more budget one. It's the Striker Vivid series. So it does not have the ability to get a nav chip even in it.
Right.
But honestly, for me, that wasn't a big deal, because again, we fish a lot of small lakes that don't have mapping on them anyway. So I'm like, why bother spending, for us, the extra money for Navionics when we can just map our own lakes that we're going to fish?
So anyway. your map now is just, the only source of that map is that unit itself, right? You can't output it anywhere, I believe, or can you?
No, you can.
You can upload it on the, I forget what it's called, the Garmin app. So you can actually,
right. Yeah. I got you. Okay. Because that's the other beauty of if you have a chip, you can actually, with your quick draw maps, you have a recording of it on a chip.
Right. But I think Garmin makes that available now. If you send it to them, do they not make that available to you back? You can.
Well, there's an app called Active Captain.
Yeah.
Right.
Or it's a website too. You can upload stuff to that and save it and put it on other devices, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it is handy to have for sure.
Oh, it's great. Fantastic.
Cool.
So what are, talking about fishing out of these small things, I know for me, when I used to fish out of the canoe and even camping, with Jess and I, we would load that canoe for camping in general. It's overloaded. We get to the site and we're pulling out boxes and boxes of stuff. We overpack. But I know that the temptation can tend to be there too. I might want to bring, if we're doing multi-species trip, I want to bring 7 rods with me in a small boat. But what are some of the decisions that either find difficult to make when you're fishing out of a small craft, or maybe what are some of the advantages to be able to do that?
Well, for one thing, we limit ourselves. We self-impose total numbers of rods and reels that that we will bring. It's hard to do, but we do it in advance. Say, okay, 4 each, 3 each, 2, whatever that case may be, and we don't go over it. So what that does, it forces you to better utilize fewer tools. Does that make any sense? Because we've been spoiled. We've been totally spoiled in terms of our fishing, because if we're unregulated, if we don't self-regulate ourselves, we'll bring 30, 40 rod and reel outfits that never get used. We just have them because of comfort, right? You have to, but when you downplay that to 1 or 2, I tend to think that we better utilize those tools and we make them work, just like the old days when all of these weren't available, right? We've kind of lost the art of doing that. So this, when we self-impose these regulations, it helps us to become better at using what we're given.
Rods built for individual purposes weren't as common back even 20 years ago.
Oh, hell no. If you had 2 rods, you were lucky. It was a bonus, but
yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of times so we got to use an all-rounder. So we're going to go bass fishing. We know we like heavy stuff, but if we're going to, let's say it's a smallmouth walleye trip up north or whatever like that, well, there's no need for a flipping stick unless, of course, you're going for pike, but normally you don't. So you kind of medium action out everything. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you go to that medium-ish. You don't go real heavy. You don't go real light. You try to take that whole scope of medium actions and kind of work with that. Because like Ann said, you got to learn. We're all 4 of us are good enough anglers to catch a largemouth bass, a 5-pound largemouth bass off a weed line with a medium action rod. We might not want to do that with a spinning rod, but we can do it. You know what I mean? You throw a Senko out or whatever like that, and you know what you're in for. The fish is going to run into the weeds and all that. You do the battle with them and all that. So you just gotta, if you have that in mind, better. Okay, I got it. I'm lighter here than normal, but we don't go heavier than normal. Is what I'm trying to say. We usually go lighter than average to encompass all round, like walleye on a jig, a smallmouth on a Senko, a pike on a spinner, something like that. So,
And by the way, that usually means that we rule out bait casting. Like if we're really limited and we're down to 1 or 2 or 3 a piece, generally that does not involve bait casting. Those are to us, I mean, that's luxury. Right. So you make do with spinning. You're going to have some heavy line on the spinning that you're really not comfortable with, but you're going to do it anyways. Braid has helped that out tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendously, right? Because we're able to put 50-pound braid on a spinning reel without any problem at all. Whereas years ago, not that many years ago, that was impossible with mono. Because 50-pound mono would be the size of a rope.
Well, it's funny. We have some listeners where they've memorized, like we always have, one of the biggest questions we get asked all the time is, what is the best general purpose rod? And we have a couple of our listeners, and they'll quote us all the time, and they'll say, oh, you should get a 7-foot one, medium heavy, bait casting rod for a bait casting combo, and you can do anything with it. You can catch almost any species that's out there. For fishing, especially around here, the Kawartha Lakes and stuff like that, because there tends to be a lot of weed. But I'd like to pose the same question to you then, maybe on the spinning side, because absolutely they are more versatile than baitcaster, I would say. What would be your recommendation for a general purpose spinning combo? It doesn't have to be brand specific or anything like that. If you want to go into that, it's fine. But kind of what action, what length, what size reel maybe?
6 to 7 foot medium action, like Pete just said, with maybe a bit of variation depending on the brand. Some are built different than others, but basic medium, 6.5 to 7 foot. 2,000. I think all the reels go into that 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 35, etc. I'd say a 2,000 size reel. Yep. would be more than enough for just about anything. And I'm trying to think. I'd even go musky fishing with it, to be honest with you. I'd equip it with obviously 50 to 80-pound braid, and I could probably make it work if I had to in a pinch,
Yeah, I think he's right in the wheelhouse. Medium, you maybe go medium light, but you don't really have to. That's just a little bit of tip action versus more all-round medium. But the 2,000 size braid, maybe you want to run a fluorocarbon leader on your braid, you do that. You know what I mean? If you want to run a straight braid, you run that too. So, and you want to put a leader on for pike or whatever, tie it on if you want to. So, yeah.
That would be it. You don't need much more than that. And by the way, that would trump taking the equivalent bait caster into action, because the outfit we just described is you can literally fish anything with it by downsizing or upsizing the line and or leader and or a combination of both. You can go to ultralight fishing with it if you really wanted to. Whereas bait casting, you just can't. Anything under 12 pounds on a bait caster, it really becomes very, very limited to what it can do. You can't skip under docks with it effectively. You can't. There's so many things that you cannot do with a bait caster, whereas a spinning gear will allow you to do both. Not saying that there's not a place for bait casting. I mean, hell, we probably use more bait casters than we do spinning for sure.
Definitely do.
But we're not limited, so we can fill the holes in with the right tool. But it only comes down to one. Yeah, that'd be it.
I agree. For all around, spinning is. I grew up using spinning. I didn't learn how to use a baitcaster till years later, but recently I've gotten into BFS, the bait finesse system. Have you ever used those?
Not yet.
Like
I've
specialized
read about
reels
that
yet?
stuff so much, but I have just not.
No.
I've not delved into it myself, and I don't think Ant has either. So, what do you think? You like it?
I like finesse fishing. I love it because it gives me, again, I'm basically, I could do everything on the BFS on a light action spinning rod.
Right.
Like you're not getting much benefit for what you're able to present.
Right.
Except it's just nice to be able to continuously use a bait caster. The biggest thing for me is no line twist.
Right.
So when I'm casting these little crankbaits and stuff like that, and I'm not talking like 16th ounce stuff, but just even like a small countdown or a small husky jerk, stuff like that. Like it's tough to cast. You can't cast it on a regular bait caster.
So 1/8 ounce.
But I don't want
so
line
if you have an 8
twist for the whole
ounce
day.
jig, you can throw that no problem on your BFS.
No
really,
problem. Yeah. I actually have 10-pound braid on my BFS, and I take an 1/8 ounce little jig, and I can fire that thing 60 feet. No problem.
That's awesome, because I keep hearing great things about it, and they're getting better and better all the time, right? So
why
is it necessary? No. Is it fun? Absolutely.
But explain to me why you would do that as opposed to using spinning gear.
For the biggest thing for me is the line twist. So on a spinning reel, every time you're reeling in, it's going to twist that line every single revolution. And oftentimes I bring multiple rods, like 1 or 2 rods in the boat. We always have a spinning rod available. But yeah, I found when I wanted to use like a finesse bite that day, and I would 3-4 times a day, I'm letting out 50 feet of line behind the boat and trying to get rid of the line twist and then retie. And I don't have that issue at all with the
It's got to be kind of a fun factor too. It must be fun throwing that little thing with bait cast like that. Is it? Like it's got.
It was a learning curve, because it's even that I have a nice BFS reel now, but even that they can get a little finicky because again it is such a small bait. But once you get that dialed in, it's fun. I actually caught my personal best smallmouth bass on my BFS combo, and it was 4.5 pound small.
Yeah, it'd be fun on that rig for sure. Good for you.
On a finesse topwater, and that thing was that was a blast.
Interesting. I hear a lot about it, but I've never experimented with it yet.
We're gonna have to check it out, man.
A lot more money to be spent now, Ange.
Yes, sir, Bobby. Sir, Bobby.
So when you're fishing, I just gotta take a break here, man. Like this is blowing my mind that you guys are even on this show. A little story time. Like we grew up watching you, and I know you don't always like we grew up watching you, but that's reality. That's a fact of our life. And Jesse and I don't think we told you before. We actually used to share a VHS tape, and we sent it back to each other. And I think it was part of the journal show, because you were fishing out in the Amazon on one of the episodes. These big like blue catfish, but it was like 4 episodes on this VHS tape, and we would just borrow it from each other back and forth.
Oh, that's awesome.
That.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I haven't seen that in years. We don't have a copy of that around here.
Remember, I just said to somebody, I just saw one around here or something. I said,
Did you?
"Oh my God, there's a tape, one of the old VHS tapes." Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
where
we have them all in the back room.
Yeah, that's what I think I
They're all
saw.
there.
Yeah,
in the
back.
Amazon.
When we moved, I put them all away.
Wow.
Dean hit him.
Yeah.
Dean, no wonder.
He's going to sell them. The guy's like, that was a great trip. That was a crazy trip, that Amazon trip. That was still one of the most memorable trips by far that I've had. I mean, we are so lucky in traveling east to west in Canada and north, you know what I mean? So, and of course, south too. Just you want to add an exotic factor into going on a fishing trip. Oh my God, go to the Amazon River, because it is not just the fishing. It's not just the fish species. It's everything else. You see the howler monkeys that are in the trees screaming at night, and then the crocodiles and the caimans all over the shoreline, and the bird life. And we're eating what they call chicken, and we don't know what the hell we're eating, because it probably ain't chicken.
I'll
You know what I
guarantee
mean?
you.
So
It had fur on it the day before.
yeah, exactly. So, crazy trip. That was so
funny
cool.
story from that trip. We were talking about electronics earlier on. So even back then, we'd always travel with some form of sonar that would allow us to see the bottom, right? And so on that trip, we brought in a couple of very basic units just to give us depth, because the Amazon is mud. So everybody has this picture of the Amazon being pristine and untouched and all that. It is a cesspool. Not only is it mud because of constant runoff from the canopy, the lush vegetation that's there, but also because every village along its stretch dumps raw sewage into it. So when I say it's a cesspool, it's a cesspool. I'm not exaggerating. But anyways, so we were fishing piranha, as we're catching piranha as bait for a fish called payara. It's that big sort of vampire looking
with the
thing.
huge teeth. Yeah.
And the only thing they eat is piranha. So we in the spot catching our piranha for the next day or later that day or whatever it was, but it was constant. Piranha after piranha. You just drop down a little hook with a chunk of meat and it's piranha. And we're just lifting them into the boat, filling the boat. And at one point, the guide, what was his name?
Leo,
little kid. And he'd see us with this sonar device, and pushing buttons and reading and say, yeah, look at that and see that. And finally, he was very curious. And he got us to understand. His question was, how do you know that that's the depth? Basically is what he was saying. Well, because it's electronic and it sends a signal down. It tells us how deep it is. He says, no, because we were showing, I don't know what depth was, 12 feet. And he's saying, no. He was wanting us to know it's shallower. And we're saying, well, no, this is the way. So he got up, jumped in the water where we're catching hundreds and hundreds of piranha. He goes down, comes back up. He said, no. And he pointed to us that it was a foot shallower than what the machine was showing us. But he jumped into a den of piranha. It was the most memorable moment. It was
we didn't know if he was going to come back up.
Yeah, we're saying, what the hell is going on here?
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy stories. We had another. I'll give you another quick one. We had Reno accidentally snagged an electric eel.
Oh,
it was an eel. We didn't know it was an electric eel. We didn't know. And it was big around. It was big around as a snake and about 4 or 5 feet long. And he had a treble hook bait or repeller or something like that.
Caught right in the middle.
It was caught, he snagged it in the middle, and we had to get that out. And of course, the skin on those things is as tough as anything. It's not scaly, but it's tough. You couldn't pull the hook out. So Reno the other guy's name was Aju. So he said, Aju, I need that lure. I have to have that lure. So back, and I probably didn't even need it, but by then we knew it was an electric eel. So Aju tried to figure out a way of getting this lure out, and he had a machete. The only thing he had was a machete. So he cut the skin on the electric eel.
Of course, there's no pliers to be found, right?
No pliers to be found with rubber handles, right? So the machete's got a wooden handle. So that's a good thing. But if like any knife, the blade is, you can see the exterior goes through it, right? Two sandwich pieces of wood. He touched that electric eel, and that friggin' machete went to the sky about 14 feet. He jumped back. My God. You would then the whole place, you feel sorry for him? No, everybody laughed their asses off at this poor guy in the middle of Brazil getting jocked by an electric eel. Oh my God! Did we get the lure? Must have.
Yeah, he got it. He managed to cut it.
Oh my God, it was funny. Crazy stories.
What a wonderful experience! It's one of those once in a lifetime that I dare say that everybody that is into the outdoors and experiencing nature at its absolute best, like nature on steroids.
Yeah,
you got to go to the Amazon.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's crazy,
and the people are fantastic.
Oh,
just amazing.
Unreal.
So
to segue back in, like you're fishing the Amazon in these it's full of monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Literal monsters. What kind of boats were you fishing out of there? Like, did you fish out of some?
They were
like,
long.
was there anything as like dugout
Yeah,
canoes?
There
or
were
something like that.
they were a
Marketers?
version of a dugout
Wow.
canoe, but
Yeah.
longer and wider.
Yeah.
Well, not super wide. I remember them being maybe 4 feet wide,
hmm
but long and square on both ends.
Yeah.
But they had to be.
What did we do in that little inland lake, though? I think we had a tinner in there. I think they might have had, remember we took the trailer in and we had a Jeep. We were sat in the trailer.
Right.
And I think they might have had a little tin bush. So they had a little bit of everything maybe in there,
Yeah.
I think. But those long canoe-ish things,
Yeah.
they were the main ones on
They were
the main
wood.
river.
They were wood.
Yeah.
They leaked like hell, but
Yeah.
they did the job, because one of the reasons I think that they needed those bigger boats in the Amazon is because there's so many, like you said, monsters. The caimans in the Nile are bigger than crocs. I'm not kidding you. They're massive. There's some. They have crocs as well, as a matter of
They
fact.
had one big
We had
ass
one
croc
big
there.
ass croc to
Oh
chase
my
us away.
God. That
But
was,
there's and porpoises, like not just regular porpoises. These are pink skinned. They look like humans.
Oh, the river
River
dolphins.
dolphins. Exactly.
They look like
Yeah.
humans.
They
when
eat
they first
peacock
come out.
bass.
They eat peacock bass.
eat
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
all over the place, and so if you're in a small boat in the Amazon, man, like it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
It's for us now. For the locals, they swim in it, they bathe in it, they do everything in it. That's their home, right? They're very comfortable in it.
So if I kind of extrapolate some stuff from there, what I'm hearing is, if you're in a smaller boat, you're closer to nature.
Yes.
You're more in tune with what you're doing, and it's going to be, if you want to have an experience on the water, a small craft is kind of where it's at.
Yeah.
To a certain
Yeah.
degree, that's one body of water where a 10-footer might be undergunning. And I'll tell you why, because the type of fishing, if you're into fishing, you're going there to fish, the type of fishing that you're doing is full body contact fishing, right? So
Yeah.
you need some place to that you feel secure in. We were
Yeah.
drift fishing for the big catfish that are in that river, the big ones, which, by the way, can be 6 to 10 feet. They're massive. They're
Are
huge.
those the blue catfish?
No.
Payabera,
Payabera
something like that.
or something.
Some kind of a name like that. They look like a blue, but they're not quite. They're more.
Yeah.
They're very
Piraiba.
yeah.
They're
something like that.
massive.
Piraiba catfish.
And the way we
Yeah.
fish them is by taking floats. What they are is like
Jabex jugs.
Jabex jugs.
Well, that was on the VHS tape,
Yes.
was
That's
jugging for
And
catfish.
so you're dropping these things in, you're dropping maybe 10 or 12 of them in at once upriver and letting them drift down. And then you go down to the end of the drift and you see where these bottles have landed, and you go over and you pick them up in hopes that at some point you're pulling one out that's got a tug on the other end of it. Well, the problem is that tug could be, 150 pounds plus. So if you don't have a boat, and you've got the Amazon itself that's working against you too, right? If you don't have a big enough boat, I dare say that they could capsize you
Mhm.
pretty darn quick.
Oh yeah, that time you and Reno had that big one on.
Oh my
I think you guys were sitting. Did you guys not sit in lawn chairs in that boat?
Yeah, we were in
What
lawn
that,
chairs.
you see, that might have been an aluminum. Who knows what kind of
That
boat
was-
that was?
that
You had lawn chairs, but yeah, when that fish pulled, as you saw in that video, that when that fish pulled, if you hung on to that boat was going to capsize for sure.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So you
yeah.
got to be careful. And sometimes for sure.
Crazy fishing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesse's gonna get on me if I don't bring it back to Ontario fishing though shortly.
Average Amazon angler.
We have a story about actually getting capsized in a boat by a monster. So
No.
we were in Andrew's portage canoe back in the day, and we decided the bright idea was the salmon were all staging in the harbors.
Oh,
And
boy.
we said, it's a calm day. Let's go out. The water's flat. So we're trolling J13 Rapalas behind the boat. I smoke a good one. The thing's literally pulling the boat around. Like you could tighten the drag up and the Chinook would literally turn the boat. And it was just like Jaws. It was just like
You call it the salmon sleigh ride.
salmon sleigh ride. So we're fighting this thing right beside the boat. It was right beside. I was just about to grab the thing. And Andrew and me both kind of leaned over at the same time. And we just, the boat flipped right over. So here we are. The canoe flipped over. Andrew's trying to grab my gear. Everything's kind of floating in the water. I have my hands on the Chinook. It has a J13 in its mouth flopping around. I'm trying to hold it away from my leg so I don't get a hook in the crotch.
Oh my God.
Luckily, one of our friends was in a kayak just a few feet away, like maybe 50 feet away. He pedaled over and he grabbed the fish and helped us out. But it was very cold. And we actually did go out again after that. But yeah, it was an experience.
Well, that same day, we walked over to a sandbar that was there. We dumped out the canoe. We had all our rods propped up, against this big log that had drifted up onto it. Got ourselves, empty of water. We're still soaked to the bone, empty of water. And then we went right back out there and kept
Nice.
But we were wearing life jackets, though. So that is one thing.
Attaboy.
There you go.
Yeah. We always advocate for life
And we
jackets.
do not endorse fishing for salmon out of very unstable canoes, just so you know.
There are kayaks designed to do this. That we you just get the right.
How big was the canoe?
Never mind that. How big is the salmon?
It's a 16 foot.
16 foot?
Yeah.
16 foot. That salmon, I think, was about.
It wasn't a massive one.
What, 20
but
pounds?
Yeah, it was just a normal size Chinook, but big enough to flip us over.
That same canoe, earlier that year, actually, I caught my personal best. It was the first salmon I ever caught out of that canoe. We were fishing that same harbor, and we had a 25-pound scale. And so I was lifting it up, and the scale maxed out before the back end of that salmon was out of the water.
Oh, nice.
So it was approaching at least 30 pounds.
Nice one.
But
Out of a canoe.
I caught that out of a 16-foot canoe.
Yeah, that's
we never said we were smart.
Average. You said you're average.
Yeah. But we're learning,
Yes.
so maybe we've learned our lessons. Now, of course, we're in more stable craft, and we've always been cautious. And I want to talk about some of the dangers, not so much dangers in a negative way to have people not have the desire to go out in a small craft, but you can do things safely, right, and be smart about it. We talked about wearing life jackets all the time, but what would be something that you would like? There's weather changes all the time. Just now, we've had some poor experiences where a storm comes in. And it comes in quick. We checked the forecast. It wasn't supposed to be there. And a random storm comes in quick and weather changes quickly. Would you have any tips for people who are going to be in a canoe or in a small watercraft to be better prepared for fishing on some water?
One of my biggest pet peeves has always been when it comes to canoes, putting too many bodies in a canoe. See, to me, my opinion, and I know a lot of people listening to this are going to frown, say, yeah, but I do it all the time with my 3 kids. My opinion is that a safe canoe is a canoe that has 2 people in it, one in the front, one in the back. When you put the third person in the middle, especially if they're kids, it's not the weight factor that's the issue. It's the distribution of that weight that becomes a problem. You guys just talked about a story where the 2 of you distributed your weight in the same place, canoe flipped over. Well, when you have more than 2 people in a canoe, that multiplies by about 10. So, because if you have 2 people now that are both distributing their weight to one side, that could influence the canoe into flipping over. So I've always, it's okay to have the weight. Like, for example, when we used to paddle Algonquin Park for years, we would put 200-300 pounds of freight in the middle of the canoe. That's okay because that freight doesn't move. That freight is stationary. And so once the 2 paddlers adjust themselves to that freight in the middle of the canoe, and if they're in unison, there's very little, even in big water, to be honest with you, there's very little that can upset a canoe except moving weight, moving weight. That's the biggest problem. So my biggest pet peeve is having too many people, and that you can take that out of the canoe and even put it to a 12-foot or a 14-foot boat.
Exactly.
You can do the same thing in that craft, and that is have live weight distributed throughout the boat that could influence it to capsize. So number of people in a boat would be my biggest pet peeve.
I agree with that. I'll tell you another very important one. You don't talk about it too often, is taking a leak out of a small boat, because we all got to take a leak when we're out fishing. And I'll tell you what, we talked to the OPP, and the number one finding they have when there's dead, drowned men is their zipper open. when they're taking a pee off the back of the boat or whatever, they're falling in. So they're obviously they didn't have their life jacket on, but even if you have your life jacket on, you still could fall in. So, you got to be very careful in that. If you're in a small boat, maybe you have a little bailing bucket or something like that. You say, buddy, turn your head. I gotta pee in this bucket and I'll pour it out, whatever, but just as long as you're even cognizant of that. A lot of times people just don't think anything of it. I'm going for a leak, and on the back of the boat and she's swaying, and but if you're thinking, God, this might be unsafe, I better brace myself, put myself against the gunnel or something like that. That's a big one that people don't really think of. And then obviously the police, the OPP stats, they show it.
Every week they used to tell me the same thing on the radio show. Right?
A wide mouth Gatorade bottle is your best friend.
There you
in this
go.
case, a normal size Gatorade bottle. It's fine.
I could use probably just a regular Coke bottle on me.
But that is true. It is very sketchy, even in our sports pal, which is extremely stable, especially if you're the guy in the front. Going to the bathroom off the side of it can be extremely sketchy. So you really do have to be careful. Yeah.
We usually head into shore whenever possible, or you have a transfer system. So you have an old coffee cup, you have a bottle, whatever. Yeah. And the bail bucket. Every boat has one.
Exactly.
Your orange pail might smell after, but just rinse it out well.
Rinse it out good.
Hey, at least you're alive. Yeah, even Jesse and I, one of the biggest things that, going back to that experience of us flipping the canoe, was when we got a little too excited and too into the moment. And when you're catching a good fish, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, since then, we've successfully, I landed a 40-inch muskie in Jesse's canoe.
Wow.
We've landed some good fish, some big fish, other salmon. Like I said, we caught that 30-pound salmon out of that same canoe. And one of the biggest things is we communicate, because we were in the canoe just a couple weeks ago, and it's still cold. It's spring water, but the water's what was the water temperature, Jesse?
Yeah, we were out pike fishing March 3rd. The water was 37 degrees, and we caught a good one. It was a 36-inch pike. And it was just it was a good fight, and the communication was good because, we did not want to flip in that water because you definitely get hypothermia. Yeah. It could have been an extremely dangerous situation. Yeah.
Just you're thinking of that. That's very important just to know, hey guys, we're in water temperature from 39 to 49, let's say, whatever. If we go in, there's chances are we might not come back out. You know what I mean? So having that in your mind, then you're thinking safety, and then the fish is kind of a secondary thing. Okay, wait, just keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Also,
go ahead, Angel.
We're assuming, we're giving you all this feedback on the assumption that the primary safety here is wearing a flotation device. And it doesn't matter how big or small the craft is. I mean, I'll even take it one step further. I think this time of year and moving forward into the spring fishery, I think people fishing from shore near big water, fast moving water should always have some kind of flotation device on. So we're going on the assumption that you guys have already established that with your audience, that the first important factor is wearing a flotation device. And then with the flotation device on, don't put too many people in a boat.
Yes.
Right? So
correct.
That's what I was referring to. But
we always, especially in small crafts, we wear it 100% of the time. I know some people will say, well, you have to have one on board, but you don't necessarily have to wear it. But especially if you're in a small craft, or especially if you're fishing by yourself from a small craft, you should always 100% of the time be wearing a life jacket. And we invested in getting some nice inflatable ones recently, which they're so small and slim, you don't even remember that you're wearing them half the time.
Don't even notice it.
Sometimes we're telling each other at the end of a long fishing day when we're, heading into the hotel room, saying, "Are you going to take that thing off?" Because we forget it on. You just leave it on, right? 100% of the time, I will go get the truck and trailer, and back it into the water with that jacket on, because
I do that too.
He does that, yeah.
So if we're talking now again small craft, let's get away from even boat motors. I love my tinner, we get out as much as we can in it. But if we're talking about on a kayak or a canoe, where we're under our own manual power, and we want to make the best use of the day, and again, talking to the average guy that's out there, they're getting out. This is their weekend to get out fishing. How important do you think research and preparation is in maximizing the success?
I think for small boats, it's even more important than it is for a big motorized vessel, because with the big motorized vessel, you have the luxury of moving around and discovering things. I'm not saying you don't have to be prepared, but it's a little more forgiving. But I think when you're in a kayak or a canoe, like, how can you go out without total preparation? Like you need to know 100% of what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. Because otherwise, unless unless fishing isn't the primary purpose for your outing, you just want to get out and do some paddling. That's a whole different ballgame. But if you want to get out and catch fish, man, you need to know everything there is to know about that body of water and where you're going to go, and where, even to the point of where you're going to put in. There's no sense in putting in at the south end of that lake if all the fishing activity is at the north end, right? So I would say 100% prepared.
Yeah, and I think because we still do it to this day with big craft is the wind warnings and the wind.
Oh.
So you're having to, if you take that, you got a northwest coming in, and there's a nice little pocket on the that end of the lake that's going to be the calmest. Look, any of the wind apps will tell you. You can see the direction going on like that. That's got to be huge, I'm sure, because it stops us from going out. If we're going to the Bay of Quinte and there's a 30K constant coming from whatever, we're not going across Big Bay. We don't want to do that even in our boat, because we're going to get wet. That doesn't matter. You're going to get beat up, right? But if there's a nice little pocket you could fish down the Trenton end or down towards Picton or something like that, you know what? We'll trailer as far as we can and put in safe water. So with a kayak and a canoe, that much more important,
sure.
right? You want the safety, but you want to be able to fish too. You want to be able to get to the fish. You can't get to it in the big wind, obviously. You want the safety, and then you want to be able to catch fish. You want to have a nice little calm-ish area so you can sort of execute properly. So
yeah, the wind app is something that we use every time we go fishing, because
fantastic.
If you're fishing, say, a certain area, and if it's shooting in from the south and the wind's whipping across the lake and you're getting these huge waves, it could be a different story than if it's coming from the north, and you won't get any of that wind because it's going across the land. So it can definitely change the area that you may want to fish. Sometimes we'll look at the app and be like, oh no, it's too windy. We can't even go out in a small craft. So you have to be You have to be smart and know your limitations. I think that's my biggest advice for anyone getting out in a small craft. Don't think that, it's fine, this is a stable kayak or whatever, and it's 35K winds. Like, don't do it. It's not worth risking your life for a bass,
Yeah. It's not
Now, do you guys wear like wetsuits when you're out in a kayak or not?
No. I think we don't generally go out when it's super, super cold. I would like to get a dry suit eventually for when, I'm planning on getting a slightly bigger kayak for fishing like in the winter. I know, especially with the ice season getting shorter and shorter, I see a lot of people, they're taking advantage of that, and they're actually going kayak fishing in January now in some of the lakes, and they're literally fishing the same way they'd fish for like lake trout and whitefish, but from a kayak because there's no ice.
Yeah.
But you definitely need a dry suit, because if you fall in the water and the water's 35 degrees, you're toast, right? So that's definitely something.
I've never heard of a dry suit being used, but it does make sense. But wetsuits for sure, because neoprene, like a diver suit, something that you would use for diving, it serves a lot of purposes, not the least of which, if you do fall in, it does help by retaining your body heat, and you generally will survive without hypothermia. But a dry suit would be the ultimate way to go. That would be fantastic. I don't know whether the cumbersome properties of a dry suit would work, but it would, if you would be fantastic.
I'd like to compare it to a full survival suit, or like a Mustang full. Why would you not use that versus
bulky?
But a dry suit's got to be bulky too, doesn't it? No,
a dry suit would be the same. That's what I'm saying. That's why a wetsuit serves kind of the happy medium in between, right? Like a 7 mil wetsuit would be, to me, be the ideal solution, because it's fairly warm, really comfortable, totally pliable, and if you fall in, you're good. It helps you float. There's something to be said about that.
Your diving experience is showing, Angelo.
Yeah, well, that's exactly where that's coming from, because I think it would be vital in real bad weather. It can be, and you don't have to have a 7 mil. I mean, that's the extreme end of it, but even a 3 mil.
I'll tell you, I did my open water exam on Lake Simcoe.
Yeah, you did it here.
44-degree water temperature, and my nuts were that big. I guarantee you, it was the coldest thing. It went through that. I mean, you survive, because, like Ann says, your body gets used to it, or it retains your heat, whatever like that. Yeah. So I got through it, but I'll tell you, I went the first time I swam my whole life. I told Angela a story. I swam my whole life and I love swimming underwater. When I went underwater in that 44-degree water temperature and it was pitch blackish, because I don't know why it just went black, I panicked. I started waving and I was going absolutely insane. I didn't know where I was and then the lady had to calm me down. Gail, she had to calm me down. Okay, come on, Pete. So the cold water, everything. So, but that's a great point. I have never fallen accidentally into cold water. I did it in a controlled circumstance, and I panicked like crazy. I was dying right there, and I was breathing, and I still thought I was dying. So it could probably play some pretty bad games on a mind if you fell in.
Have you guys ever experienced that? Have you, in your travels when you're canoeing, have you seen somebody else in peril flipping a canoe? Yeah. It's pretty scary for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've went through the ice. Thankfully wasn't that deep, but I dropped down, was able to catch myself on the edge of a pressure crack had opened up. And I thought I'd stepped far enough over it, but there's kind of a snowdrift that looked like that ice shelf coming across, and I went right down to the pressure crack. So I only went up to, my chest, and I popped myself out real quick. But it was after that I thought, I want to see how. I know it's like you said, Pete. It's not the same when it happens accidentally, but I wanted to see what it was like, how my body starts to react, like the bodily functions, how they start changing in cold water. So actually, I drilled a bunch of holes near the shore on Lake Simcoe, middle of winter. It was early February, and I went out there, drilled a bunch of holes, and I went into my swimsuit. I wanted to see. Let's just stand here. I had a buddy with me. I wasn't alone, and I'm like, hey, I just want to see, can I still breathe? If I remain calm, if I have keep my wits about me, how long can I not how long can I stay in there? Cause I didn't stay in that long, but how much is it going to take over my mind? And it's cold. It absolutely is. And I would recommend for people who have the opportunity to take a moment. The more prepared you are for something, the better it is. More chances you'll be able to keep a calmer head if something arises. Like we were saying before, communicating nowadays, because we flipped the canoe while landing a fish. But when Jesse was catching that pike this spring, I was telling him, okay, like I reel in, I set my rod down, it hooks away completely, it's gone. I grab the net and I say audibly, like, okay, remain calm. I'm going to stay calm.
Yep.
If he's bringing it up to the boat, we communicate exactly where that fish is going to be, where he's going to bring it. If we have to lean over, I'll say, okay, I'm going to lean to the starboard side or the port side, and you can offset it, and we'll just remain calm and scoop it. So the good communication in moments can help, again, greatly increase the safety aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's
good work.
huge.
Good.
Yeah. I actually had to save a guy once. I was fishing on the Otonabee River, and I was in my sports pal, and there was a guy in a small boat that actually, I guess he leaned over. He wasn't wearing his life jacket. He was sitting on it like a cushion, and he went right in, and he couldn't get out of his boat, and he started yelling out to me. So I had to scoot over to him quick in the sports pal, and I had to hold the side of his boat so it wouldn't completely sink. And I gunned the trolling motor, and I got him to shore. But I was saying to him, that could have been potentially, if I wasn't there, because the guy had a bad knee or something like that.
Yeah, he couldn't swim.
He couldn't swim. He wasn't wearing a life jacket. He would have just plopped under and possibly could have been the end, right? So that just shows the importance of keeping safety in mind when you're in a small craft, because you're not invincible out there. It is dangerous being on the water. So you have to, at the very least, be wearing your life jacket.
And things happen fast.
Very fast, yeah.
And we don't realize just how quickly you can go from total peace and harmony to total disaster and destruction. And that's why life jackets are so important.
Yeah.
And why we've been harping that tune for so many years. It's extraordinary. What you did on Lake Simcoe is okay. It kind of gives you a glimpse into what could happen, but when it's a total shock and comes out of nowhere, it's hard to simulate that in controlled conditions, because it's the shock factor. And canoeing in outback remote lakes, first of all, we talked a little earlier on about one of the safety aspects that we think is important. I believe, and I know you guys might disagree with this, but I believe that if you're going into the outback to canoe and portage and canoe and that kind of experience, it has to be at least 2 boats. it has to be 2 canoes, because you never know when one could save the other.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh,
That's for
it's
sure.
so
It makes a lot of sense.
I'll tell you a quick story. For years, we would paddle into the outback in Algonquin Park, is spring and fall trips with the same group of guys. And one year, and it was mandatory. Life jackets. Nobody goes near the water without life jackets. Anyways, so there were 5 of us, 5 canoes, and there was a group that was ahead of us. They were doing the same portage, but they were well ahead of us on the portage route. So when we got to the shores of one of the big lakes, they were almost to the other side of it. And we were just, the canoes were all in, and we're just preparing to start our paddle across. And we heard this, Pete knows this story. We heard this incredible sound of a turbine out in the middle of Algonquin Park. Well, it wasn't a turbine, it was a tornado. And we see it coming through the woods on the far shore, and you could see trees and branches blowing all over the place, and this thing is spinning, and it's coming towards us. So we're all ready to get right back on shore and huddle down. Well, in between it and us was this group of canoers who were ahead of us, but they were well down. They were down shore from where it was coming out to make water. And all of a sudden it turned, almost like it was alive. And it saw this group of paddlers that were coming up along the shore. And it turned, instead of coming out on the lake, it turned, it just skimmed along the shoreline right down towards them. The inevitable happened. It just completely ran through them, and we could see the boats and canoes were just flying all over the place. And so there's a case where, this happened in a matter, I'm going to say probably 30 seconds. From the time we first saw it to the time that they were totally capsized was 30 seconds. So you couldn't even really prepare for it as far as they're concerned. So obviously we paddled quickly as we could to get to the other side. We managed to save everybody, but one barely saved. And the reason I brought this up is one of the problems in a case like that is when you're trying to save somebody that's obviously in desperate need of help, one of the problems is they could capsize you themselves.
Right.
Right. And that's where the life jacket comes in. If you're already at the scene and you're equipped with a flotation device, even if you do capsize, you're already ahead of the game. But because you don't have time to put that thing on in a canoe, as you guys know, if you're frantically trying to head towards saving somebody, you can't pull that thing out of wherever you're hiding it and put it on. It's so important. And it's such an easy thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put on a life jacket if you're on the water. It's simple. Anyways, enough of my ranting.
Well, we'll go back onto the happy side of fishing.
Yes.
And in all your experience, fishing, you've been fishing across Canada for years, and we've seen a lot of your adventures. Not all of them, but we've seen a lot of them on TV. I even go down since we're average Ontario anglers, is there some place in Ontario that is like a hidden gem for you that you were able to fish in a small craft? What would be kind of like your top, it's either the same place or one from each year of what you think would be like an amazing hidden gem that is purely for small craft kind of things?
For me, it's got to be either Quetico or Algonquin, one of the 2 parks, because they are strictly small craft areas.
Yeah.
And my fondest memories are from those 2 parks, paddling through 7 or 8 lakes to make a camp at the other end. They would be and as far as the fishery goes, could it get any better? It's stocked. Hello, it's like a grocery store of fish. When the shelves get low, they put in more. So I would have to say for me, it's probably Algonquin.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to the getaway experiences that I've had that in a small craft that would be only small craft would be beaver ponds to me. So when you get onto a beaver pond that has fish, now I don't know how you find that out, because the ones that I've fished, the few that I've fished have been told there was fish there, but I have had some of the most amazing small boat or kayak experiences. And we had a bass fishing trip north of Caladar, Mikey Burris's hunting camp, and it was unbelievable. This looked like a swamp. It doesn't look like there'd be a minnow living in it, and it was unreal for largemouth bass, stuff like that. So you probably find these little, ponds on public land, obviously, or permission, and like beaver ponds or just small ponds. That's so cool because no big boat's ever been on that water. Nobody's hardly ever beaten those fish up, right? So
I always make Jesse, portage with me up above beaver dams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When we're camping. Like, let's just see. And
Yeah.
so far we haven't. There's one that I told him about that we went camping, and we crossed over. And we pulled out the best fish of the trip out of that pond. But that's the only one that we've ever actually caught stuff out of.
Yeah. So you're experimenting. That's what I said. If you were told, if you said, "Hey guys, there's a great rainbow trout pond or a brook trout pond or something like that," it's nice to get that kind of tip. But in your experience, you're experimenting, you might find the best trout pond ever. You know what I mean? You might say, "Oh my God, nobody's ever fished there. It's insane." So
I'll give you 3 names from Algonquin that if anybody that is interested in doing that kind of a trip, Ryan would be one. Chipmunk is another. Those would be the 2 best that are accessible. With the fairly simple. I think one of them is a 4 portage trip, and the other one's a 3 portage trip. Now there are some that are a lot more aggressive than that are unbelievable. Lavier is one that is just dream trips that you would ever make, but it's 7 portages and they're all tough. They're like really, really, really hard.
wow, yeah,
But once you get in there, I've done it twice in my lifetime. Once you get in there, oh my God, it is spectacular. Absolutely breathtaking. But the problem is getting out. Getting in, well, because getting in, you're full of that anticipation, the energy, and whatever it is that you've got, the adrenaline rush. Coming out, though, the minute you start packing to get back, oh my God, it's depressing as hell.
It's a place you want to get to, but never want to leave.
You never want to leave. Yeah. So.
Oh man. Well, I have one last question for you guys, and it's off topic, but it's something that I wanted to ask you for a number of years. And again, you guys have the experience, hands down. If you can't compare our experiences to yours, because again, you had so much more and the opportunities you've been able to do. So, what is a bit of tackle or technology, kind of like hardware tackle wise, though, that isn't used anymore or never made it to market? Let's say it was a prototype besides the mouse,
right?
But that never made it to market and that you miss today.
So it's not available today?
Yeah, not available today. What's something that kind of like surprises you that it just doesn't exist anymore?
We say it all the time. We say it all the time now. There's some, lures that were a staple in fishing 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that all of a sudden they just go dead. And I'll bring one up. I mean, we all love topwater fishing. Well, whatever happened to the crazy crawler? Was there a better topwater bait than the crazy crawler?
Yeah,
but
true.
But nobody uses it, right? We're all into the spook and other items like that. But the crazy crawler was an all-time huge. I mean, I don't even know if it's available anymore. You probably could find it online.
I think Hedden still sells them. Yeah.
Do they? But nobody uses.
I've got a couple. But the reason why I don't for myself, I have caught fish on them.
Yeah.
But if there's any floating debris from a pine needle or a piece of grass, it just stops working halfway through the boat.
But you know what? A crazy crawler that is clogged up does a lot more than most topwater baits today that are not clogged. Think about it. Even if it's got one wing left, it's still going, "Hey, help me. I'm you know what I mean?"
The one wing crazy killer. You just invented a new bait there, buddy. One winger. God, the left winger. That's good.
But that would be one that
if we're looking
makes you wonder.
If we're looking at baits that did make it to market, for instance, we travel a lot in the north, and we don't see anybody throwing a daredevil for pike anymore. You know what I mean? You guys go pike fishing all the time. I guarantee you're throwing jerk baits, suspending jerk baits, 110 millimeter, et cetera, right? All the beautiful, fancy stuff. That old daredevil or the 5 of diamonds, my God, that spoon is the best. It does nothing. You just troll it. You can cast it. You don't have to do anything with it.
Hang it over the side of the boat while you're having lunch.
It still will catch fish to this day, but we're as guilty as anybody. We don't throw them either. We just don't throw them. So I'm sure there's lots of them. The hula popper, the jitterbug, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's probably a ton of baits like that.
All kinds of them that work fantastic.
Still work. You know, the cream scoundrel, the 6-inch original cream scoundrel plastic worm on a snelled hook. That thing caught me so many bass when I was a kid. No, you don't see that anymore. No, sir.
I love to collect old tackle boxes and old baits. So when my grandpa passed away, I got a couple of his. I was the guy in the family who got some of his fishing equipment.
Right.
And it started a collection. Like now I love getting, even at some of the customers' homes I've gone to do, plumbing at and whatnot. And they know I appreciate fishing, and they've given me their tackle box. And I've got some really cool baits, like the old Heelan flatfish from back in the day. I have some of the original colors.
Oh, wow.
Like that's back cool. From like the 30s and 40s. I've got a spinner hanging up the top of that board over there. That's from the late 1800s.
Oh, wow.
And there's some, like I love the vintage baits. And I like to use them. One of my favorite brands is Creek Chub.
Yeah.
So you remember the crazy fish?
Crazy.
It was so it's a crayfish imitator crankbait, and it's got these little rubber legs on the side of it. But it was one of the first crankbaits that it was a countdown essentially.
Yeah.
So you count it down how many feet it sinks, reel it in, and it's one of the best baits still to this day that I've used that actually stays at that desired depth all the way to the boat. I love that.
Interesting.
Nice. They were great
because none of them do that, by the way, nowadays. Everybody's got a floating bait. You might find the odd suspending bait, but very rare. So
Smithwick, I think, still makes a suspending bait that stays suspended
or stays
stays in one spot. Anyways, those we ask ourselves all the time, why aren't we using these things? But we don't. I'll tell you one bait though that's making a comeback, and this is a plug for one of our supporters in our ventures. That is the Twitch bait by Yozuri.
Jesse and I just bought one.
I'm telling you right now, that has changed my fishing life completely. I used to be a big Twitch bait guy back in the 70s, and by the early 80s, it was kind of gone. But oh my God, this second evolution of Twitch baiting is just, it's craziness. Fish just
how do you retrieve it then? Because do you fish it just like a jerk bait?
I for the most part, sometimes, as Pete discovered last year on a shoot, sometimes you pull it. It's a crankbait. Sometimes you make it do crankbait things, but for the most part, just throw it out and twitch it back. Just jerk it, reel, jerk, reel, jerk. Sometimes they want a faster retrieve, so it's jerk, jerk, jerk. Reel, jerk, 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 make it do a little more than normal. You have to let the fish kind of tell you. But regardless of the action that you put in the bait, just the profile of this bait, because normally Twitch baits used to be, for the most part, long, slender, minnow-shaped baits. This one is, the profile is what makes it work. It's chubby. It's a wider profile than normal jerk baits. And I think that's given it this crazy action, because after you do the jerk, 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 and you pause it for just a second, the bait, it was almost like that jerk, jerk, jerk wound it up, because when you pause it, it does a little wobble on its own. And I
saw that.
And I think that's what really calls these fish in, because they just saw it swishing around, and now it stops and it just kind of goes and it's shimmy. Like teasing them, right?
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, a little shimmy. That little shimmy helps a lot.
I love it.
That profile reminds me of like a super shad wrap with no lip. Like it's thick.
That big profile.
Yeah,
right?
that profile of it. And the other good thing about that bait is, I don't even know if they make the other ones anymore, but the ones we're using they got SS on the top of them, slow sinking.
Yeah.
That's not even suspending. That it actually does a tiny little drop. It looks like it's suspending because you can't tell from the top, but it's slowly sinking, and I think that's a kick in the butt for a fish, because these all of a sudden it's just coming right into their zone, right into their eyes. It helps.
It's crazy. Yeah. Man. And we've been using the saltwater version of those too lately, because they have a bigger size. But now I see they've introduced it to the freshwater. Mm-hmm. That's the big 4-inch, which is their magnum size. Oh my God, it's deadly.
It's a cool bait.
It's deadly for anything, by the way, anything at all.
That's funny, because I was just at sale maybe 2 weeks ago, and I looked at that lure and I was like, man, I've seen the Fishin' Canada guys use that on their show a few times. I was like, that's a cool lure. I finally saw it in person, so I picked one up, And I showed Andrew, I was like, dude, you got to get one of these for pike fishing because it's the bigger one. I think the 4-inch slow sink.
Exactly.
And he went the next day and picked one up, and he's like, oh, I can't wait to use it. It looks really awesome. We're excited to try it out.
And it works good with a leader too. If you're pike fishing, you can put a leader on it. You don't want to put a real heavy one on it, but the proper size leader, it works fine with that too. So
I'm actually making my own 50-pound fluoro leaders, so
there you go.
Nice.
You'd be good.
It worked well with it when I was trying it out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that'll be perfect.
Nice. Oh, you'll enjoy it, man. It'll change the way you fish. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
We're gonna have a little bit of housekeeping, and then after we're gonna have as usual, we have a quote of the week at the end of each episode. So just kind of a one sentence. It could be humorous, it could be whatever you like, but we'll get your quote of the week in just a moment. Jesse's going to give a little bit of housekeeping for us.
All right, so here's the housekeeping, the only housekeeping I like doing, by the way. So we would like to thank everyone for writing us reviews. We've got a lot of super awesome reviews, and a few episodes ago, we actually read some of them that we got, and we're going to continue to do that, not on this episode, but maybe next episode, we're going to read some of the new reviews. We do appreciate it. It helps us do better in the charts as well, which helps us get some cool giveaways for you guys going. So we do appreciate that as well. We'd like to thank our Patreon members that help keep this weekly show up and running, helping us cover some of the expenses for this weekly show as well. And that's all the housekeeping. Not a lot this week.
And the good reviews gets us to be able to meet people just like these guys.
Right cool. On. Well, it's certainly been our pleasure. We, contrary to what most people might think, Pete and I, anyways, I can't vouch for our whole industry, but Pete and I love nothing more than to make people feel comfortable within our circles. Because sometimes, when we've been doing this for 4 decades, people tend to put you up on a pedestal and that you're not approachable. And nothing could be further from the truth from both of us. We just love people, and we never have lost sight of how we got to be where we are. And that's with all of your people that are watching and listening to your podcasts and ours and everybody else's. So to us, that is key. Never lose touch with reality. And we are who we are.
Thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's it. Thank you guys so much for coming on. And we'll finish off with as tradition states, the quote of the week.
I'm going to give you one that my grandma sent me. Mans knows this one well. It was on a little plaque. And my grandma, she's been around fish her whole life and fishing, and with her, it goes, I ask a simple question, the truth I only wish. Are all fishermen liars, or do only liars fish? There you go, boys. She's so right.